I have a surprise for our anniversary. My name is Michael. I'm 37. In Phoenix, I run quality control at North Peak Engineering. And I believed I knew my wife. For months, Melissa had been acting different. Not angry different, but happy different. Too happy. While doing dishes, she hummed. She bought new clothes, and after 2 years of excuses, she started going to the gym again. Our 10th anniversary was approaching, and she kept mentioning this surprise. The way she said it made my stomach turn, as if she was savoring something I wasn't supposed to understand yet. One evening, watching her apply makeup at 8 p.m. for what she called a book club meeting, I asked, "What kind of surprise?" "You'll see." She kissed my cheek, leaving a lipstick mark I wiped off after she left. Book club meetings that lasted until midnight. Weekend errands that took 4 hours. Phone calls she took in the garage. I wasn't stupid, but I also wasn't the type to snoop through her things or follow her around like some jealous husband. I figured if she wanted out, she'd tell me. The surprise came 3 days before our actual anniversary. A shipment delay killed our afternoon schedule, so I got home early from work around 3 p.m. In the driveway was Melissa's car, next to a silver BMW I didn't recognize. I walked through the front door, calling her name. No answer. From upstairs, their voices carried down. Melissa's laugh. A man's voice I recognized but couldn't place immediately. I climbed the stairs. Our bedroom door was cracked open. "Michael should be home soon," the man said. "Are you sure about this?" "Trust me," Melissa replied. "It's perfect timing." I pushed the door open wider. They were both dressed, sitting on the edge of our bed like they were waiting for something. Melissa wore the red dress I'd bought her for Christmas. The man was Raymond, the financial advisor she'd introduced me to at a neighborhood barbecue 6 months earlier. A clean-cut guy in his 40s who drove the BMW and talked about investment opportunities. "Surprise," Melissa said, standing up with a smile that made my blood cold. They weren't undressed. They weren't scrambling to cover themselves. They were just sitting there like this was supposed to happen, like I was supposed to join some conversation I'd walked into the middle of. But the way they looked at each other told me everything. The way Raymond's hand rested on her knee. The way she leaned into him when she laughed. I stood in the doorway for maybe 10 seconds. Neither of them said anything else. Melissa kept smiling like she was proud of herself. I turned around, walked downstairs, grabbed my keys and left. I drove to the Marriott downtown, checked in for a week, paid cash, turned off my phone, sat on the bed, and stared at the wall until dark. 10 years of marriage. We'd met at Arizona State when I was finishing my engineering degree. She was studying marketing, had big plans for her own consulting business. A smart woman, a beautiful woman, the kind who turned heads when she walked into a room. We bought the house in Scottsdale 5 years ago. We split everything 50-50 even though my salary at North Peak was higher. She eventually gave up on the consulting idea and worked part-time at a boutique downtown. She said she wanted to focus on us, maybe start a family someday. That someday never came. Every time I brought up kids, she found a reason to wait. More money, better timing. Her career, my career, always something. Raymond had appeared at the Hendersons' barbecue last summer. Tom Henderson introduced him as a financial advisor who'd helped their portfolio grow 15% in 6 months. Impressive numbers. Melissa spent most of that evening talking to him about investment strategies. "We should diversify our portfolio," she said on the drive home. "Raymond thinks we're being too conservative." I didn't think much of it. Melissa had always been interested in money, ways to make more of it. She started having coffee with Raymond to discuss our finances, then lunch meetings, then weekend sessions where they'd spread papers across our dining room table and talk about market trends. "He's really helping us," she'd say when I questioned the frequency of their meetings. "You should trust me on this." Trust. The word felt different now. Sitting in a hotel room while my wife entertained her lover in our bedroom. The warnings had been there. Phone calls where she'd step outside. Credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to. A gym membership she claimed was for yoga classes, but she never brought home a yoga mat. 3 months ago, Raymond had suggested I introduce him to some of my colleagues at North Peak. Professional networking, he called it mutual benefit. I'd given him contact information for 5 guys from work, engineers with decent salaries and retirement funds they wanted to grow. Tom Henderson had recommended Raymond, and the numbers he showed looked legitimate. These are good people, I told Raymond when I handed over their information. Don't waste their time unless you can deliver. Of course, he'd said, shaking my hand. I appreciate the trust. That word again. Trust. I ordered room service and ate in silence. Tomorrow I'd start figuring out what came next. The 3rd day at the hotel, I called a private investigator. His name was Frank Sullivan, a retired Phoenix police detective who now handled divorce cases and corporate fraud. I found his number online and met him at a diner on Camelback Road. Standard cheating spouse investigation? He asked after I explained the situation. Start there, I said. But I want to know everything. Her finances, his business, how long this has been going on, what they're planning. Frank was in his 60s, gray-haired with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of betrayal. This going to be one of those cases where you want me to find dirt so you can destroy them? I want the truth. All of it. Truth costs extra. You sure you want to know everything? I nodded. Frank called me 2 days later. We need to meet. Bring a notebook. This time we met at his office, a small space above a coffee shop in central Phoenix. Frank had 3 manila folders on his desk. Your wife's been having an affair with Raymond Torres for 8 months, he started. But that's not the interesting part. He opened the first folder. Bank statements, investment records, correspondence. Raymond Torres runs a Ponzi scheme. Classic setup. He uses early investors' money to pay fake returns to later investors. Creates the appearance of success to attract more victims. My stomach dropped. Your wife knows. She's been recruiting victims through her social connections. She gets a cut of every investment she brings in. A 5% commission on initial deposits. Frank opened the second folder. Photos of Melissa meeting with people I recognized. Neighbors, friends from church, women from her book club that apparently did exist. She's been working as his recruiter for 6 months. The affair provides cover for their business meetings. Romance keeps them both motivated. The third folder contained the worst news. Remember those colleagues you introduced to Raymond? All 5 invested. A total of $430,000 from your contacts alone. The money's gone. Raymond's been paying fake returns with new investor deposits, but the well's running dry. I stared at the documents, names I recognized, people who trusted my recommendation. How much total? I asked. Estimated $2.3 million from about 40 investors. Your wife's recruitment network brought in roughly 60% of that money. Frank leaned back in his chair. There's more. Raymond's planning to disappear soon, liquidating assets. Your wife's been helping him move money to offshore accounts. I sat there processing the information. My marriage was over. That hurt, but I'd already accepted it. What made me sick was knowing that people I cared about had lost their savings because they trusted me. What kind of evidence do you have? I asked. Frank smiled. Enough to bury them both. I spent the next day reading through Frank's files. Financial records, photographs, recorded phone conversations. The scope of their operation was bigger than I'd imagined. Melissa hadn't just been cheating. She'd been systematically targeting our social circle for financial fraud. The evidence showed Raymond promising 15% annual returns on conservative investments. He used legitimate investment terminology and showed doctored portfolio statements to prove his track record. New investors received their promised returns for the first few months, money that actually came from newer victims. Melissa's role was crucial. She provided credibility and access. When she recommended Raymond to her book club friends or neighbors, they trusted her judgment. When I introduced him to my colleagues, they trusted mine. Frank had recordings of their phone conversations discussing strategy. Michael's engineer friends are perfect, Melissa said in one call. They understand numbers but not finance. Easy targets. Hearing her voice say those words made something break inside me. I called Frank from my hotel room. I want to confront them directly. Set up a meeting. Bad idea, Frank said. You tip them off, they'll run. Raymond's already moving money offshore. You spook them now, your friends never see a dime. Then what do you suggest? Let me keep gathering evidence another week, maybe two. Then we involve federal authorities. The SEC handles investment fraud. The FBI handles wire fraud and money laundering. How long before they disappear? Hard to say, but Raymond's been more careful lately. Fewer new investors, more calls to banks in the Cayman Islands. I hung up and stared at the hotel room walls. 2 weeks felt like forever. The next morning, I broke my own rule and drove past the house. Melissa's car was gone. Raymond's BMW sat in my driveway like he owned the place. I parked across the street and called Frank. Change of plans. I'm going to talk to them. Michael, don't. I hung up and walked to my front door. Raymond answered, wearing one of my old Arizona State shirts and holding a cup of coffee. Coffee from my kitchen made with my coffee maker. Michael. He didn't look surprised. Melissa said you were staying somewhere else. This is still my house. Of course. Come in. The casual way he invited me into my own home made my hands shake. Melissa was at the kitchen table with papers spread out. Financial documents, investor statements. She looked up when I walked in. We need to talk, she said. About what? About our future. About Raymond's business opportunities. About the mistake you made walking out. She said it like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I know about the Ponzi scheme, I said. Raymond's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Melissa's face went pale. I don't know what you mean, Raymond said. $2.3 million, 40 investors. My colleagues at North Peak lost $400,000 because I vouched for you. Melissa stood up. You don't understand what you're talking about. I understand perfectly. You've been recruiting victims for him, getting paid to destroy our friends' lives. Raymond sat down his coffee cup. Michael, you're obviously upset about the marriage situation, but business is business. Your friends made investment decisions as adults, with fraudulent information. If you can prove that, take it to court, Melissa said. Otherwise, you're just making accusations. The coldness in her voice shocked me. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This was someone I'd never met. I want you both out of my house, I said. Raymond smiled. Actually, that's not going to happen. See, legally speaking, this is Melissa's house, too. Arizona is a community property state. She has every right to be here. And I have every right to bring my business partner to my home, Melissa added. Business partner. That's what she called him now. I left without another word. They were both smiling when I walked out. Back at the hotel, I called Frank and told him about the confrontation. You gave them a warning, he said. They'll accelerate their timeline now. Good. Let them run. You have enough evidence to prosecute. Maybe, but I found something else. Something bigger. Frank arrived at my hotel room 20 minutes later with a new folder. After you left today, I decided to dig deeper into Raymond's background. Turns out this isn't his first Ponzi scheme. He spread out documents on the small hotel table. Raymond Torres is actually Raymond Terrell. He ran a similar operation in Colorado 3 years ago. Defrauded investors out of $1.8 million. Fled before prosecution. How's he operating under a different name? False identity. Fake social security number. Real driver's license and credit history under the Torres name. Professional job. Frank opened another section of the folder. But here's the interesting part. Your wife didn't just meet him at a barbecue. She sought him out. Found him through online forums where people discuss investment fraud. She knew exactly who he was. The room felt like it was spinning. Melissa initiated contact with a known fraudster. More than that, Frank continued, she provided startup capital. $25,000 from your joint savings account. Took it out in cash withdrawals over 2 months. Raymond used that money to establish credibility with his first few investors. Frank showed me bank statements I'd never seen. Cash withdrawals Melissa had made while I was at work. She's not just a recruiter. She's a partner. An equal investor in the fraud. How did she find him? Online research. She'd been studying investment fraud for over a year before she made contact. Downloaded guides on how Ponzi schemes work. Participated in forums where fraudsters share techniques. Frank pulled out printed web pages. Melissa's user account on fraud forums discussing victim psychology and recruitment strategies. She planned this whole thing. The affair is secondary. Business first, pleasure second. I sat on the hotel bed reading through Melissa's online posts. She'd written detailed analyses of how financial fraud worked, discussed the psychology of victim selection, shared strategies for building trust with potential investors. One post made my blood run cold. The key is using your existing relationships. People who trust you personally will trust your business recommendations without proper due diligence. How long has she been planning this? I asked. Based on her online activity, at least 18 months. She studied multiple fraud cases, learned what worked and what led to prosecution. Then she found Raymond and proposed a partnership. Frank closed the folder. There's something else. They're planning to disappear next week. Booked flights to Mexico under false names. Raymond's been liquidating his remaining assets. They think you'll take a few months to figure out the scope of the fraud. They're running together. Partners in crime, partners in escape. The affair was probably part of the business plan. Easier to coordinate illegal activities when you're romantically involved. I stood up and walked to the hotel window. Phoenix stretched out below me. City lights marking neighborhoods where our victims lived. People who'd trusted Melissa and me. What's the timeline for federal prosecution? If we turn over evidence tomorrow, they might issue warrants within a week. But Raymond and Melissa will be gone by then. Unless we move faster. Frank nodded. I have enough evidence to destroy them both, but we need to be smart about how we do it. What do you recommend? Let them think they're safe, then hit them with everything at once. Public exposure, federal charges, asset seizure. Complete destruction. Do it. Frank and I spent the next 2 days planning the takedown. We needed to move fast, but we also needed to ensure maximum impact. The key is coordination, Frank explained. Hit them from multiple directions simultaneously. They can't run if they're dealing with immediate crisis. Step 1 was documenting everything. Frank had already compiled comprehensive evidence of the Ponzi scheme, but we needed additional proof of Melissa's leadership role. He'd installed surveillance equipment outside the house and recorded their planning conversations. Step 2 was protecting the victims. Frank contacted the SEC and FBI, providing preliminary evidence to start official investigations. Federal agencies moved slowly, but they could freeze assets once they had probable cause. Step 3 was the public exposure. Frank had connections with investigative journalists at the Arizona Republic. Financial fraud involving local victims was exactly the kind of story they loved. We'll coordinate releases, Frank said. Federal agencies serve warrants. The newspaper publishes its investigation. And you deliver the final blow. What's the final blow? Frank smiled. You'll see. We scheduled everything for Thursday morning. Raymond and Melissa had booked flights to Mexico for Friday evening. They thought they had one more day to finalize their escape. Thursday morning at 6 a.m., FBI agents knocked on my front door. Frank and I watched from across the street as they served search warrants and arrested Raymond and Melissa. Both were led away in handcuffs while agents carried boxes of evidence from the house. At 8 a.m., the Arizona Republic published a front-page story titled, "Local Couple Defrauds Investors of Millions in Ponzi Scheme." The article included photos of Raymond and Melissa, details of their operation, and quotes from victims who'd lost their life savings. At 10 a.m., the SEC announced a civil enforcement action seeking full asset recovery and restitution for victims. But Frank's final blow came at noon. He'd prepared sealed packages for delivery to every victim of the fraud. Each package contained complete documentation of how they'd been targeted, evidence of Raymond and Melissa's criminal partnership, and proof that the affair had been part of their business strategy. The packages also included something else. Copies of Melissa's online posts discussing victim psychology and recruitment techniques. I was sitting in the hotel lobby when Frank called. "Packages delivered," he said. All 43 victims now have complete evidence of how they were conned, including your 5 colleagues. How are they reacting? Check your phone. I turned on my phone for the first time in a week. 37 missed calls. Dozens of text messages. Tom Henderson from work. Michael, just got the package. Can't believe Melissa planned this whole thing. Are you okay? Janet Morrison from the neighborhood. Saw the news. So sorry you went through this. Melissa fooled all of us. Dave Collins from North Peak Engineering. Got the evidence package. Want you to know we don't blame you. You were a victim, too. The messages kept coming. Anger at Raymond and Melissa. Sympathy for me. Gratitude for Frank's investigation. But the most important message came from Frank. Turn on Channel 12 News. I found a television in the hotel bar. The news was broadcasting live from the Maricopa County Jail. Raymond and Melissa were being led into the courthouse for their arraignment hearing. Melissa looked directly into the camera as reporters shouted questions. Her face was pale, her carefully styled hair disheveled. The confident woman who'd smiled while betraying me was gone. Raymond kept his head down, but I could see the fear in his eyes. The reporter announced they were being held without bail pending federal trial. The judge had determined they were flight risks based on evidence of their planned escape to Mexico. I watched my wife disappear into the courthouse and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. The trial lasted 3 months. Frank's evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, recorded conversations, online posts, victim testimonies, and proof of the planned escape to Mexico. I testified for 2 days, explaining how I'd unknowingly helped Melissa and Raymond target my colleagues. The prosecutor made it clear I was a victim, not a co-conspirator. Melissa's defense attorney tried to blame everything on Raymond, claiming she'd been manipulated and coerced, but her own online posts destroyed that argument. The jury saw her detailed plans for psychological manipulation of victims. Raymond's attorney claimed the investments were legitimate, but poorly managed. The evidence of fake portfolio statements and offshore money transfers made that defense impossible. The federal prosecutor was relentless. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation, she told the jury. This was a calculated, systematic destruction of trust and financial security. The defendants studied their victims, exploited personal relationships, and planned their escape when the scheme collapsed. Victim impact statements filled an entire day. 43 people described losing retirement savings, children's college funds, and money meant for medical expenses. Several victims were my colleagues from North Peak Engineering. Dave Collins addressed the court directly. I trusted Michael's recommendation because I trusted Michael. Melissa and Raymond weaponized that friendship to steal my family's future. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and identity theft. Melissa received 12 years in federal prison. Raymond received 15 years as the scheme's primary operator. The judge ordered complete asset forfeiture and restitution to victims, though most of the money was already gone. I stood outside the courthouse watching Melissa being led away in handcuffs. She looked at me once, her face empty of the confidence she'd shown that day in our bedroom. Raymond refused to make eye contact with anyone. Frank joined me on the courthouse steps. How do you feel? Empty, I said, but clean. The victims recovered about 30 cents on every dollar through asset forfeiture. Not much, but something. My colleagues at North Peak eventually forgave me, understanding I'd been deceived. 2. I sold the house in Scottsdale. Too many memories of betrayal. I bought a smaller place in Tempe, closer to work, with no room for anyone but me. Melissa's book club friends and neighbors learned the truth from news coverage and Frank's evidence packages. They'd all been targeted for recruitment at various times. The revelation that their friend had systematically evaluated them as potential fraud victims destroyed any sympathy they might have felt. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Melissa in federal prison. She wanted to explain herself, claimed she'd been in love with Raymond and had made mistakes. I threw the letter away without reading past the first paragraph. Frank and I stayed in touch. He'd moved on to other cases, but he checked in occasionally to see how I was handling everything. "You did the right thing," he told me during one of our coffee meetings. "A lot of men would have just walked away and let the victims suffer." I returned to work at North Peak Engineering. The company supported me throughout the investigation and trial. My colleagues treated me with respect, understanding I'd been as deceived as anyone. Melissa and Raymond faced the full consequences of their systematic betrayal when their Ponzi scheme collapsed under federal investigation. Melissa served 12 years in federal prison while watching her reputation crumble as news coverage detailed how she had coldly calculated the psychological manipulation of friends and neighbors for financial gain. Her book club friends, neighbors, and social circle completely ostracized her when they learned she had systematically evaluated them as potential fraud victims, treating their trust and friendship as business opportunities rather than genuine relationships. Raymond received 15 years in federal prison and faced additional charges when investigators discovered his previous Colorado fraud scheme, adding 5 more years to his sentence, while his financial advisor license was permanently revoked. Both lost their homes, cars, and all assets through federal forfeiture proceedings, leaving them with nothing but legal debt and destroyed reputations when they were eventually released. The 43 victims pursued civil litigation against both defendants, ensuring that any future earnings would be garnished for restitution payments. Melissa's family disowned her after learning the extent of her calculated deception, while Raymond's professional network in the financial industry blacklisted him permanently. Their affair, which had seemed like a romantic partnership, became evidence of criminal conspiracy that extended their prison sentences and eliminated any possibility of future financial recovery. Walking away from that courthouse, I realized that Melissa's betrayal had taught me something valuable about the difference between trust and verification, in marriage, in friendship, and in business. Real integrity means protecting those who rely on your judgment, not exploiting their confidence for personal gain.